We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
The Dialogue, the community voice of Southern California's young professional network. Relevant discussions about the thoughts, concerns, opportunities, and challenges faced by today's generational leaders. Real talk, real people. This is The Dialogue. The Dialogue with Starlett Quarles on LA Talk Live and streaming live at www.latalklive.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to The Dialogue. Real talk, real people. We're on live at latalklive.com. I am your host, Starlett Quarles, and as always, The Dialogue is the voice of our generation. So thank you so much for joining us here every Wednesday from 5 to 6, where we like to discuss the topics that are relevant to today's generational leaders. We are continuing our month-long series. Actually, we're adding an extra day today on Let's Talk About Politics. And today we are discussing the 2012 election results. Can I get a round of applause? We re-elected President Barack Obama to another 4 years. So now what? Exactly. So now what do we do? What's going to happen? What are we holding him accountable? What are we looking forward to for the next 4 years? Not only nationally, but especially locally here in Los Angeles. We also had a local election here in LA. So we want to talk about some of those results today with our guests. But if you missed our show last week, we talked about political accountability, which we will be getting into a little bit today. And our guests included Derek Steele, Tony Wayford, and Shirley Hussar, where if you saw her yesterday on our all-day election coverage of LA Get Out and Vote, she was on the Black Republican show, and unfortunately, Richard, why are you letting Michael Collier do that to Shirley? So check out the replay of LA Get Out and Vote. There was a section with some Black Republicans with Shirley Hussar, but we love Shirley here on The Dialogue. So to check out that replay of last week's show on political accountability, please check us out at thedialoguela.com, or you can always go to facebook.com/the LA and LA talklive.com. My engineer Richard Carr is just messing with me. Tonight, like I said, we're going to be recapping the 2012 election results nationally and locally with some of my favorite gentlemen here in Los Angeles who have been part of my evolution in my real estate career. We have Dr. Phil Hart of Hart Realty Advisor, who was on the board with me of an organization called the Urban Land Institute, and he now is the he's on the national board for the Real Estate Associate Program, which is a program that helps minorities get into the commercial real estate field. Michael Banner from the Los Angeles LDC, local nonprofit financial institution, and my co-chair on the REAP board here in Los Angeles, Stan Mullen, who is the president of Mullen Capital and Asset Management. Hello there, sir. They're all here to talk about, so now what? Now that we have elected President Barack Obama for another 4 years, now that we have some new propositions that have passed or have not passed, what are we going to do? What are we going to do here locally to stay engaged and to make sure that our voices are still heard? So make sure you give us a call today at 323-247-7443. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to get into our conversation on the 2012 election results recap right here on The Dialogue. I'm your host, Starlett Quarles, and we will be right back.
We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and hosts of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
I remember the early days of my business when I started with a personal computer, new business cards, and my line of credit was on plastic.
Now things have changed, and you have a real job-creating business.
Recently, I turned to my bank for a new loan and found out they couldn't meet my needs. I now realize that after the credit crisis, many financial institutions no longer have bankers with the necessary expertise to understand my business or have the ability to provide flexible credit solutions.
You searched for a better solution from someone with financial knowledge of a big bank and common sense understanding of a small business.
I found Michael Banner and the Los Angeles LDC, who solved my problem and exceeded my expectations. Now, when I have a credit or other financial need, my first call is to the Los Angeles LDC. They've earned my trust by providing the best credit solutions and advice at affordable rates and terms. Where do you go when the banks say no?
Los Angeles LDC, a community development financial institution, on the web at losangelesldc.com or by phone 800-366-1178. Loans made under a commercial finance lender's license from the California Department of Corporations.
Do you have or know of someone with a child or adult family member with developmental disabilities that would benefit from a social recreation program in the South Los Angeles area? At Ability First's Harry A. Meyer Center at 8090 Crenshaw Boulevard in Inglewood, we offer afternoon and after-school care programs for children and adults with disabilities, which include socialization, recreation, community outings, independent living skill training, as well as physical fitness activities. You can reach us at 323-753-3101 and visit us at www.abilityfirst.org.
Welcome back to the dialogue, Real Talk, Real People. I am your host, Starlett Quarles, and today we are recapping the election results with our illustrious panel today. Michael Banner of the Los Angeles LDC. Where you go when the banks say no? How you doing there, sir?
I'm having a wonderful time. It's always cool hanging out with you.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Phil Hart, Hart Realty Advisors, National REIT Board, ULI, Ready, Colorado. I
like that commercial with Michael Banner's LDC. And then you had an Ability First commercial,
Absolutely.
too. I'm on the board of Ability First.
That's right. So thank you, Dr. Hart, for joining us. And Stan Mullen. Hi, Stan Mullen.
Hi, honey.
How are you doing?
I'm trying to figure out what board Phil's not on.
I know, right?
That's a good question.
But before I go, Michael, congratulations on your article in the Icons, the 2013 33rd Annual Icons of Downtown Los Angeles. There's a nice little article here on the accomplishments that you made in downtown Los Angeles with Los Angeles LDC.
That's making 4th and Main a reality where people hang out nowadays.
So now tell us a little bit about what Los Angeles LDC does so that this article can make sense to our viewers.
Okay, we are a licensed commercial finance company that is a little bit different from a normal financial institution since we are a tax-exempt organization, which simply means I loan money to people who can pay me back, and I don't have shareholders who I have to share the profits with. It gets always put back into the organization to further economic development.
Okay, and how can people find you? So before we get on, I want them to make sure that they can get to your website.
Easy way to find me is you Google Michael Banner, and I'm not the old white guys.
But I think we also have a banner that has his website on it too, but it's losangelesldc.com. Dr. Hart Realty Advisors. I mean, you do so much, but from the real estate perspective, talk about Hart Realty Advisors.
Well, we are a developer and a consultant and provide advisory services for in terms of developing industrial parks, urban business parks, life sciences projects here in Los Angeles and other parts of the country.
And how can people contact you or find your website?
www.hartrealtyadvisors.com.
Okay. And Stan Mullen, talk about Mullen Capital and Asset Management.
We do two things, real estate receiverships, and we could explain that at some other time when there's a lot of time, and commercial real estate litigation expert witness work.
Excellent. Oh, that's interesting.
Yep, little niche.
It is. How often are you have to call into court?
Unfortunately, for many people, too often.
But welcome, Stan.
Yeah, this is how you want to meet Stan most of the time.
Exactly. But thank you so much for joining us. And they all come from, as you see, a real estate background. But we're going to be talking about politics and how it's going to impact us locally, especially as it relates to the redevelopment in our communities. And moving forward with our election, we have a mayoral election coming up next year. So we definitely want to talk about that. But last night, Obama won. So, what are your thoughts? Anybody, what are your thoughts on his second term win, and what surprised you the most? I'm sorry with you, Dr. Hart.
Well, I was not surprised by anything. I'd been telling my friends who were
Not even how early he won?
no, who I've been involved with presidential candidates, campaigns for about 30 years, so
Okay.
I have a pretty good sense of what probably is going to happen.
Okay.
But I had been telling my friends who said that they were nervous that that Romney was not going to win, and that Obama had the better path to the electoral college majority, the 270 that he needed.
Okay.
The only thing that surprised me, I was a little surprised that it was about 8:15 when he made it over the threshold. But otherwise, I was not really.
Now, why did that
surprised.
surprise you?
I didn't think it would be that early.
Oh, okay.
I thought it
so
might be
time.
a little later than 8:15 our time,
Okay.
11:15 East Coast time.
All right.
But other than that, I was not surprised. I mean, the main thing I think during the campaign that disappointed me was how weak his performance was in the debate in Denver. And I've done speech writing for a lot of presidential candidates, and I didn't write his remarks that night. But what disappointed me was that he accepted the Democratic nomination in 2008 in Denver. And at not one point in his opening remarks or his closing remarks did he make reference to that fact and the fact that propelled him to the presidency. And that was part of his weak performance in Denver that night.
Okay. All right. Very good. Michael.
Well, for me, it's pretty simple. The best man won.
Okay. All right.
That's the way elections work out. If you're not any good, you don't win. And I also believe that this election, in my mind, turned a lot on trust.
What do you mean?
That you want somebody in that office making those big decisions as somebody that you trust.
Okay.
And I just don't believe that Mitt Romney convinced people that he could be trusted.
And Stan? What do you think? Were you surprised? Were there any surprises?
I think, like everyone else, we expected him to win,
Okay.
but we know that surprises do happen, so my reaction was relieved. But I would say that the surprises were a couple. One, magnitude, the difference in electoral votes between him and Romney.
Okay.
The win was the first win for a second term by a president with a smaller winning margin than his initial win. And it's also a time where it was the highest unemployment rate on the election eve in 64 years for someone to get into office. So he really overcame a huge obstacle by getting into the office a second time. And I guess the last surprise was his political organization. They were very efficient in
Absolutely.
the use of every donor's dollar. They had a lot of early ad buys. The Romney campaign wasted a lot of donor dollars. And their Get Out the Vote organization was amazing. 326 offices, 63 districts in 26 states. I think 90% of his gifts were $50 or less. On average, they were about 35. I could just go on and on. They knocked on 3 million doors.
Wow.
So just a very, very well-run organization.
So how would you feel? I mean, we talked about moving to Canada if Romney won. How would you have felt if he didn't win last night? Well, how would we be feeling today? Would we all be suicidal?
If Mitt had if he had won, I certainly would have been disappointed, like I think the other people here on the panel. But really, both candidates, at their truest core, are really moderates, at least in my view. And but I would have been disappointed because he would have still felt an allegiance to his donor base, which a lot of that is well-to-do donors, so he would have weakened financial reform, Dodd-Frank. I worry that he would have gotten us into another war. The wealth disparity in our country probably would have expanded further, and that's a huge issue for all of us. I don't think he would have pushed for an increase in taxes to help reduce our debt and deficit. And so it would have been disappointing for sure.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Well, I know Mitt Romney because
You know him personally?
Yeah, I live in Massachusetts, part of my life, and all three of us, Obama, Mitt Romney, and myself, had offices. Our times overlapped in Massachusetts. I was the only one of the three that had an office in the black community. for whatever that's worth.
It is worse. So Obama didn't have office in the black community?
He was at Harvard Law School.
Very good. Okay.
He was head of the Harvard Review, so he was at Harvard Law School. Mitt Romney, Bain Capital was downtown Boston. I was in Roxbury.
Okay.
But our time overlaps, so we're all three familiar with each other. So I'm obviously familiar with Mitt Romney as governor. He's essentially a moderate Republican who was moved to the right through the GOP presidential nomination process. And his 4 years as governor from 2003 to 2007 weren't terrible. He was able to forge an alliance with Democrats to a certain extent, not to the extent that he presented in the debates, but he was able to forge an alliance with Democrats because Massachusetts is a predominantly Democratic state. So to be a Republican to get elected as governor in Massachusetts is a feat in itself. So he's effective in working across the lines. I would not have panicked if he was. I knew he wasn't going to be elected, but if he had been elected, I could have called him up and said, "Mitt, this is what you got to do."
Is that right? We have
whether he'd have listened to me is another matter.
Hi, you're on the dialogue. I believe we have a caller. Hi, you're on with the dialogue. You have a comment or question for our guests? Hello. Are you there?
No, just listening. Just listening.
Just listening. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. The stats in terms of his voters. Blacks, 93%. Well, that's kind of obvious. Latinos, 71%. Asians, 73%. Women, 55%. And under 30, which I was very happy about, 60%. Michael Banner, what are these stats? And whites, Obama, 39%. Romney, 59%. Non-whites, Obama, 78%. Romney, 20%. What do these stats tell you?
Well, in one regard, to me, it means that people vote for people that look like them or have some connection with their reality. So Obama getting the highest percentage of African-American vote, that's pretty much so a given. And I always ask people, I got asked by a young guy at a cocktail party 2 weeks ago who just moved here from Virginia, I think it said.
Okay.
And we were watching one of the last debates, and he says, "Oh, you're going to vote for Obama because he's black." I go, well, that could be one of the reasons. Do you vote for people who look like you? And he had nothing to say.
Absolutely. Very good.
But I do think that the confluence of people of color, and I know this from my professional career, that all of the years that I worked as a banker, folks who came from foreign countries, looked like anything close to me, they would always gravitate to me if they had to talk to anybody to start up a conversation with the guy in the bank that they thought could help them.
Right.
So I think that translates into what we are seeing happen in politics right now.
Okay. All right. Dr. Hart.
Well, the reality is that the demographics of the nation are changing. The demographics of the electorate are changing. And the coalition that propelled Obama the second time is similar to the first time, but probably even more pronounced, is young people, women, and minorities. Those
what about Asians? I was surprised about how high percentage of the Asians, they're traditionally Republicans.
Well, it goes back to the point that Michael was making, but it's basically the coalition was young people, women, and minorities. And that's the weakness that the Republicans have to address in terms of their base, because they're going to have a difficult time electing a presidential candidate unless they make some severe adjustments in terms of how they outreach to young people, women, and minorities.
Okay, Richard, we had a caller. Hi, you're on with the dialogue. You have a comment or question for our guest?
Good evening, Jackie DuPont Walker, and I just kudos to all the guests on.
Hi, Jackie DuPont Walker.
Hey, boss lady.
This election has just been phenomenal, but I'd like your reflections on the pundits constantly talking about the lack of mandate that President Obama received when Bush was applauded for losing the popular vote and still being our president. And I'd just like you to comment on it so that perhaps we could get someone thinking about the fact this is just wrong.
Excellent. Okay. Anybody want to take that? Thank you, Jackie.
Well, mandates are usually defined by the margin of difference in the popular vote and the margin of difference in terms of the electoral college vote. The point that Stan made earlier, that if you look at Obama's victory this time compared to the first time, is a smaller margin in terms of both the popular vote and the electoral vote. So the tendency in that instance is for pundits, and remember they are pundits, is that they will say he does not have a mandate entering into his second term as the president. And in addition, you've got the House still in control of the Republicans. Senate is Democratic controlled. So usually a mandate is defined by a president with a strong margin in the popular and electoral vote, and probably both houses in that same party's column.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment?
I took that as fast as it came out just to mean that he won, so let's slow him down as fast as we can.
Right.
And consider the source. If you would probably go back and look at some videotape, the pundits, quote unquote, that look like us probably sounded different than pundits who didn't look like us.
Very good. Richard, do we have another caller? Hi, you're on with the dialogue. You have a comment or question for our guest?
Hi, Starlett. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for your call.
All right, this is Derek Steele.
Derek Steele, Social Justice Learning Institute. Measure
Yes,
GG, congratulations. Measure GG passed yesterday, 82%. Thank you.
Man.
Congratulations here in Inglewood. So our Inglewood schools are going to be getting some infrastructure and some updates thanks to Measure GG. But what's your question for our guests?
I wanted to actually ask how the gentleman felt about the impact of the youth and what that is actually going to look like moving forward in the future. Because I have my own feelings towards it, but I like to hear, from other folks that may have an opinion how the youth, people my age are actually looked upon.
And what is your specific
as they're more engaged moving forward?
What is your specific age demographic? That 23 to 35, correct?
Yes,
okay.
ma'am. 23, 35.
Okay, so Stan, thank you, Derek. So Stan, what do you think about the young professionals? Specifically that 23 to 35 age group.
I'm going to even go a little bit younger than that 23 age group, because a lot of the time that the president spent campaigning for the last couple of years has been on college campuses, and I think that shows his wisdom, because people that are in college, they're at a point in time in life where they're really forming their opinions about policy issues. They're typically much more inclined to be activist. And if a candidate is looking for people that are going to make the calls and wear the bumper stickers and walk the streets, you're gonna want to go to people that are forming their opinion and have the energy to speak their voice. So I just think, getting to the caller's question, that it is a strategic thing for someone like the president to focus on folks that are young. And I hope that those that share his policy views always focus on that group.
Absolutely, thank you. Everybody has their, predictions as to why Romney didn't win. I also blame it on Ohio and the binders comment. But what do you guys think? What did he do wrong? Where did the race go wrong for Romney?
He was too rich.
Okay. He just wasn't relatable enough to American people?
I think that has a lot to do with it, that people wouldn't believe that he understood what their plight was and what they care about and what concerns.
I definitely felt that way.
What keeps them up at night? That's the question you get asked them. I'm not able to pay the light bill. That's why I'm up at night. And I remember the comment he made, something about his wife's cars. She had like 5 Cadillacs or something. And I'm going, okay. And 5 houses. Most people don't have
a whole lot
that
of people
experience
don't have
like that.
Exactly.
And he's friends with the NASCAR owners.
Yeah. So I think that's part of the disconnect. And I don't mean that he's probably not a nice guy and all that kind of stuff, but you're leading a country that's going through all kinds of economic demise, and he's a guy that's pretty much so insulated from any of that. So how do you relate to people?
Exactly. So had he stopped the Ohio commercials, do you think we would be having a different conversation today?
I don't think so, but certainly the auto manufacturers giving their employees the day off to vote was very helpful in Ohio for sure. But in answer to your question about what really hurt Mitt, because he seems to have all or many of the qualities that people want. He presents himself well. He's a good communicator. He's right. He's successful. He's a good family man, and on and on and on. But I think 2 things that did hurt him a lot. One is credibility, and Dr. Hart talked about that earlier. I think all in, what people admire in others is someone that takes a position and stands by it. And I think that was a huge weakness for him. And there was a perception that even though he's a very capable person, that he will change his opinions to the extent that it'll help him get to his
Right.
goal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really part of the dilemma, I think, for the Republicans, because if you look at Mitt Romney's passage of the equivalent of the the Health Care Act in Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
is simply prior to the national passage of that act, and him unable to defend that and to tout that as an accomplishment. And the reason he wasn't was because through the Republican nomination process, he was driven to the right.
Right.
He wasn't able to be who he was. And then also his response in terms of him being a child of Detroit, and him not being able to defend the bailout of the auto industry as a child of Detroit. His father, George Romney, was the governor of Massachusetts when I was a graduate student at Michigan State University. He is a moderate Republican governor. And so for Mitt Romney, on those two instances of the Health Care Act not being able to promote what he did in Massachusetts as a good thing, but rather to try to hide from it, and then the fact that he, as a child of Detroit, could not defend the bailout, and both those facts were he was driven to the right by the Republican Party on both those instances, and it ended up being something that hurt him.
So what's going to be the new reality of the Republican Party? I mean, what now are they going to have to contend with in terms of dealing with the Democrats?
When you see a visual like we saw last night, just the visual, if you compare the visual from McCormick Place in Chicago to the Boston Convention Center, where Romney's non-victory party took place, just the visual.
Right.
The visual is striking in terms of the diversity that you saw in Chicago and the lack of diversity that you saw in Boston. And that's the essence of the Republican Party problem at this point in time.
What about you, Stan?
Yesterday in the LA Times, Dwayne Wickham wrote a good article titled "Republicans Facing the Last Political Hurrah."
Okay.
And it speaks to your question. I encourage all the listeners to go back and look at that article. But it talks about, I think, the issues that the other guests were referring to, lack of diversity, as Dr. Hart talked about in the audience. We've got a society that was initially diverse in some respects, but today is very diverse. That's what our strength is. And to the extent that the Republican Party doesn't find a way to appeal to our diverse and growing diversity, they're going to have a hard time holding office. And the other comment in the article is whites losing out.
Okay.
The white community is losing its strength, and they need to pay attention to that.
Michael.
I would say simplistically that party is now a dinosaur. And if it doesn't figure out how to change and adapt, it will be extinct.
So how do you think they're going to appeal to our minority interests?
Well, it's really, the point is with a lot of our organizations that are not addressing the need to be reflective of our society as a whole. The Republican Party is just one example of that. Michael and I and Stan, we're in the real estate industry. We are members of several organizations that are at that same
Absolutely
crossroads in terms of, I know you know, and how do they develop a strategy that enables them to reach across racial, ethnic, gender lines in an effective way that can still retain their basic mission, but enable that mission to move forward in a new day.
I mean, go ahead. I'm sorry, Stan.
I'll just mention there's a book that John Dean of Watergate fame wrote several years back, and it's titled "Conservatives Without a Conscience." And it compares the Republican Party of the 1960s to the Republican Party of today, and how there is very little similarity between the two. And I think that if the Republican Party took a little bit more of an approach that they had 20 or 30 years ago, they probably have better success going forward.
Before we go to commercial break, I just want to ask, so last week, we talked about political accountability. So what are you guys going to be looking to hold Obama accountable for in the next 4 years? What should we all be looking to hold him accountable for, Michael?
Well, I've got $122 million reason to hold him accountable.
Can you share?
Because of what I do, we get organizations like mine have the ability to go to Treasury and get funding.
Okay.
So we are waiting for Congress to reconvene to find out what happens in this budget, because the Treasury Department has a Community Development Financial Institution Fund, and when Bush was in office, that budget kept declining. It went down from like 125 million to 87 million.
And just quickly explain what a CDFI is.
CDFI is an organization like mine, a finance company that finances businesses, real estate transactions in underserved or depressed areas of greater poverty. So I'm the place that when you go to the bank and it says, we're not feeling this, you better call Michael. They will tell you to call me because I might be able to figure it out. And this money comes from the Treasury Department that I work with.
Okay, all right. Phil, what are you going to be looking to hold Obama accountable for?
I want him to look in the mirror and understand who he is and relate and get on the bully pulpit in terms of the black community, the Latino community.
Okay, I'm glad we're going to talk about the black and brown agenda when we come back. Stan, what are you going to hold Obama accountable? What are you going to be looking for him to fulfill in his last 4 years?
I want him to keep doing what he has been doing. I want him to keep us out of a war with Iran. I want him to make sure that he continues to appoint Supreme Court justices as he has in the past. And primarily deal with the three big financial issues we've got coming up. Lame duck session starts next week, and we've got expiration of Bush tax cuts at the end of the year. Budget Control Act kicks in at the end of the year. We've got a debt ceiling limit at $16.4 trillion, and that comes into effect. It hits a limit in mid-February. And then the federal government funding limit expires at the end of March. So he's got a lot of financial storms coming his way.
You think he can make it happen?
If anyone can, he can.
I love it. We'll be right back.
Thank you for tuning in to LA Talk Live, reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we're more than just talk. Stay tuned.
Interested in advertising your business, product, or service here on The Dialogue? Call 323-547-7748. The Dialogue will help you promote your business, increase your traffic, and bring in new clients through innovative and creative marketing packages, including affordable radio ad campaigns for small businesses. Find out more. Call 323-547-7748. That's 323-547-7748. Or go to www.thedialoguela.com. And now, back to The Dialogue. The Dialogue with Starlett Quarles. Real talk, real people.
Hi, this is Nick Corte, inviting you to join me Sundays at 10 a.m. right here on LA Talk Live for our all-new show, People Are Talking. Join us as we offer you a weekly dose of fresh perspectives with in-studio guests, hot topics in the world of politics and pop culture, and the voices of everyday people impacted by the political issues coming to a ballot box near you. So don't forget to tune in to People Are Talking exclusively on latalklive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B, watch us on Ustream.tv, or even catch us under the Radio Flags app under ILATK. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Welcome back. We in here grooving, y'all. Welcome back to The Dialogue, Real Talk, Real People. I'm your host, Starlett Quarles, and we are talking about the 2012 election results. So now what? What are we going to do? Now that we've elected Barack Obama as our president, what are our expectations? What are we holding him accountable to? We're talking about it here today with our guests, Michael Banner, Dr. Phil Hart, and Stan Mullen. And we're also going to get into our local election results. And we had some propositions that passed, and we had some new candidates that won their seats, and we're going to talk about that right about now. But before we do, Dr. Hart, I want to touch back to your topic about the black and brown agenda. Although I feel like the brown agenda is legalization and immigration, but what is the black agenda? I mean, we had this controversy or this conversation yesterday on our show. What is the black agenda?
Well,
what do you think the black agenda
well,
is?
you look at going back to Gurnard Myrdal's American Dilemma classic from 1944 up to now. It's really the number one priority is bettering our economic condition.
Okay.
That remains the number one priority of the black community. How do we better our economic condition? We've got the highest unemployment rate, and I think that if Obama and the private sector can address the unemployment rate and do some job creation in the black community, it's going to have an impact upon other communities. I don't think you want to do it the reverse, because I think that you've got to look at where the most hurt is in terms of job loss and the need for job creation, and that will benefit the entire society. Secondly, Obama's 2008 inaugural speech was the first presidential inauguration speech since 1948 that didn't make mention of the poor or poverty. And not to say all black people are poor, because that's not the case.
Right.
But he's got to pay attention to that issue as well. And having grown up in Denver, I've always been an advocate of black brown coalition building.
Okay.
And it's even more important here in Los Angeles and nationwide, not just around the immigration issue, but around how we move together forward strongly and in coalition with each other.
So what do you think about Tavis's and Cornell's poverty tour?
Well, Tavis and Cornell have another axe to grind with the president that is more personal, but they've then translated into a poverty diatribe against the president. Tavis and Cornell were kicked off a radio station in Chicago a few weeks ago because, they were on Obama, and you don't do that in Chicago. But they found another station.
In Chicago?
Yeah, in Chicago. But they have some good points, but they're coming across as if they're beating up the first black president. And if you're a black intellectual from Princeton and a black PBS NPR commentator, you've got to do more than that.
Are people listening? Are black people listening to them?
Well, the type of people listening to them are white people.
Okay,
because the best way to success if you're a black commentator is be a black conservative and beat up on black elected officials.
Stan, why are you laughing?
I think Dr. Hart is right.
All right, thank you. Mike, you want to have any comments on the black agenda or the black and brown coalition that we need to start working on?
Well, I think part of it, from my perspective, it's more of an economic issue that affects people of color, that we have the stratification that's going on and has been going on for a long time. And one of the things that the president talked about is this a place, America, where everybody can win. And I think there's a perception still that's out there that the deck is stacked. And if you're not in the room with the secret handshake, you don't know how to make anything. How did they make anything happen? And so I think that's one of the things that, at least aspirationally, he keeps trying to communicate to people that if we can level the playing field, everybody's got a shot. It won't just be the ruling class in this, what I call caste class system that we have here in this country, which is designed to produce losers.
Okay, Stan.
Yeah, I think the one thing we haven't talked about, though, much is education.
Okay.
And I think, the elementary school, kind of nursery through 8th grade years, they are the formative years for all of us.
Well, Prop 30 did pass here locally.
Yeah, that'll help. But I think at the end of the day, if there's going to be equal opportunity for everyone, everyone is going to be able to take advantage of that opportunity if they have the skill sets to take advantage of it.
Okay, fair
enough. And a lot of that just comes from the ability to read and write and speak. And I think they're just, as the president has made it a priority, education going forward has to be a focus for all of us in the country, for our youth.
Very good. Okay, I'm sorry, caller, we lost you, but please feel free to call back, 323-247-7443. So let's talk about the local results. Jackie Lacey, first black district attorney, first woman DA. What are your thoughts? What are your expectations about Jackie Lacey? Anything?
I hopefully don't have to meet her.
I mean, she made history.
Unless I'm writing a contribution check. No, I think that she's an example of somebody who's put in the time, competent at what she can do, and represents the next wave of leadership in that particular body in this county.
Yeah, I mean, look at Kamala. We have these black women, you know what I mean, that are making great strides in the legal field. But I want to take this call before we lose them. Hi, you're on with the dialogue. You have a comment or question for our guest? Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
It keeps dropping and breaking up on me.
You have a question? Okay. Hopefully you can give us a call back so we can get your question. Laura Richardson. She lost to Janice Hahn.
She lost to Janice.
Why did she lose?
Well, Laura had some issues that she had.
Stan, why is your face doing that?
And I think Janice, given her the Hahn legacy, and like any elected official, we've got to hold them accountable. I think Janice will listen to us.
So we didn't hold Laura accountable. We let her get away.
No, I'm not saying we didn't hold Laura accountable. I'm jumping to the fact that Janice won. So how do we make Janice? Janice is not a black woman,
right?
But Janice, like I said, with the Hahn legacy, is responsive. But like any elected official, you've got to make them be responsive. We're paying their salaries in essence.
You're absolutely right. So what about that impact of losing a black in Congress? I mean, we gained a woman, but we lost a black. I mean, we still had a woman, but
I think you can't afford to have poor representation, no matter what color it is.
Very good.
So at the end of the day, if she wasn't meeting the needs of her constituents, that's probably why nobody voted for her and why she couldn't raise any money.
Okay. Stan?
I mean, she was under a cloud of that ethics investigation, and there was an awful lot written about it.
Okay.
And I think she's the kind of person that if that cloud wasn't there, if those things did not occur, then she would be the kind of person that would be in a safe seat, and she would have been in that seat for 30 years. And I think a lot of us would have liked to have had her be there for 30 years. But
and speaking
she
of
did
which,
it to herself, I think.
Speaking of which, in incumbents, you know what I mean? They get comfortable. I mean, so how do we better hold our incumbents accountable? We get so comfortable with them, you know.
You act like towards them like they're your employee.
But we don't.
Well, that's what we gotta do.
We teach. I believe we deal with our black politicians like they're celebrities.
Well, we shouldn't deal with them like they're celebrities, nor should we deal with our celebrities like they're celebrities. we put too many people up on pedestals.
That is so true.
And we need to treat them like regular, normal people.
We do.
So our elected officials, we need to treat them like, be responsive at least. You can't do everything I want, obviously, but be responsive to your constituents.
I mean, but you can. I mean, we're all in the real estate industry, and since the civil unrest, we haven't seen too much redevelopment that has happened. I mean, have we not been more engaged? Have we not held politicians more accountable to seeing more in South LA?
Yeah, I think you hit the word correctly, Starlett. Engaged. I had a brief chance to get to know the former parliamentarian of the House, a New England tweed jacket, pipe smoking Dutchman named Guy Vanderjack. And he said, hey, the electorate typically complains about elected officials. Well, you guys, the electorate, simply, you elect people that are a mirror image of yourselves.
Wow.
So if we don't like the people that are in office, it's really just, it's on us to change that. And we don't. Historically, people stay in office, and I think reading and your comment, being engaged, are the two things. I just don't think as a society we read enough, we're aware enough. Most of us make decisions on elected issues at the last minute. And I think if we paid attention to what our elected officials are doing, we would keep them more accountable.
Okay.
And also with term limits, what we see here in California is we just recycle our elected officials from one level to another level.
Michael?
I tend to try to take a real practical approach. If I have self-interest, something that I want to get accomplished, you have to stay engaged to get what you want done. And if you think about the political process, it's a contact sport. Voting in one election does not solve your problems. In fact, voting in all the elections might not necessarily just solve your problems. If you have something you want to get done, you need to stay engaged with the people that you put in office and say, look, this is important to me. And if you're not in their face, I can tell you, I spend a lot of time around City Hall. I can tell you how many times I've heard people, nobody ever said anything. You hear that all the time. Nobody said that.
But we're in real estate, so we understand that. We understand the need to get, council approval. We understand the need to get setbacks and have to go to get talk to the city council. I mean, we understand the political process because it is part of our business. But what about the local teachers or just regular employees? How do we get them to understand the importance of being more civically engaged and to have a voice in local politics?
I'd echo Michael Banner's comment, and I use a sports analogy. I think most athletic teams do well during the season based on how they trained in the off season. And I think it's the same in policy issues. There is a tendency, I think as Dr. Hart said, where once we cast our ballot or we go to the Planning Commission one time, we feel that we've done our job. But it's really the off season when there isn't a permit to be entitled, when there isn't an election that's coming due. That's the time that we all as an electorate should be involved in getting to know our elected officials, the issues that they're dealing with, go to those meetings, meet with our plan checkers, develop those relationships. It's the off season that really makes it.
Okay, let's talk about some of the local propositions that passed last night. Proposition 34, the death penalty. It did not pass. Why do you think it didn't pass? Did people vote emotionally?
Well, on that issue, people tend to vote emotionally. I mean, you can look at it from a kind of an economic cost-benefit analysis in terms of, do we save money by killing people versus keep them in jail for, lifetime,
right?
Versus how many mistakes have been made where we've put people on death row, and with the scientific technology that we have now, particularly DNA. Cases where not only here in California but other places where revealed that this individual is really not the one that was guilty, and we've executed some people that were innocent. So you've got kind of those two strands, I think.
Okay. Anybody else in the death penalty?
There still is a perception that it is a deterrent for capital offenses, but whether or not that's true.
Isn't Charles Manson still on death row?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. He's still breathing and getting free food and rent and shelter.
Still writing music.
Right. Proposition 36, 3 strikes. Now that did pass. Why do you believe 3 strikes passed?
I think it goes to what Phil just mentioned. The economics of it now show us that the prison industrial complex is very, very expensive and it's unsustainable.
So it's only now if your third offense is not a violent offense that you will not be charged a third strike, but if it is,
they don't lock you up and throw away the key.
Okay,
which means they have to, put you in layaway forever, and it's expensive.
Erwin Chemerinsky, who's the dean of the UCI Law School, has written a new book that's just out called "Conservatives' Assault on the Constitution," and he talks about a particular case that he litigated in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, where there had been a person that had committed 2 property crimes in San Bernardino. Those were his 2 first strikes.
Okay.
And then his third strike was stealing Disney videos totaling under $400 for Christmas gifts for his children. But that county, Riverside and San Bernardino both, are the DAs in those counties do enforce that third strike law.
Wow.
So Chemerinsky went to the Supreme Court, said, hey, this guy shouldn't be sent away for life for stealing.
He was sent away for life?
He was sent away, absolutely, life in prison. That's his third strike. He's gone, and it's for stealing less than $400 worth of goods. And the U.S. Supreme Court did not agree with Chemerinsky's argument. They pushed it back to the states because the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't like to overrule the states.
Okay.
And the California Supreme Court
upheld it?
Well, the California Supreme Court had upheld that decision. So you have many people. There are 325 people in California today that are in prison for life for committing nonviolent crimes on their third strike. This eliminates that. So, and also those 325 people that are in prison today for that third strike, the chances now are most of those, especially those that have been in for a long time, will be released much sooner.
What about this guy that Chemerinsky was talking about? Will he get released sooner?
Well, Chemerinsky is the dean
Okay.
of the University of California Irvine Law School. He's
in another institution.
No, but the guy that he was talking about, will he get...
his tenure will most likely be much shorter.
Okay.
But
very
Chemerinsky is the author of the constitutional law book used in most U.S. law schools.
Okay, very good. Dr. Hart, Measure J.
Measure J is a good thing. Extension of, so we can continue.
Now we had Damian Goodman on here yesterday, who was
God bless Damien.
who was pushing that Measure J was going to be something bad for the Crenshaw community because there won't be a Lamert Park stop. The infrastructure won't go underneath. So talk about Measure J and how it actually is probably a good thing for the Crenshaw community.
Well, I think it's a good thing. I was on the urban design committee for Expo Phase 1, and I'm an advocate of spending on transit, and I think Measure J extending Measure R for 30 more years is a good thing, and that the issue of Lamert Park Village having a station, I think Lamert Park there should be a Lamert Park Village station as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And I think that we need to keep putting pressure on the MTA to make sure that happens. Part of it is related to how much the bid's going to come in on to build the Crenshaw line, but we need a Lamert Park station. And let me just say in general, in terms of these propositions, and this is just a general comment as someone who is not a big proposition person, I think the propositions as they come forth on the ballot show that the legislature is not doing their job. So instead of Molly Munger spending $34 million on Prop 8, I'd have preferred to see that $34 million go right to the LAUSD as opposed to a prop that goes on the state ballot, where if the legislature was doing their job and Prop 13 hadn't put hamstrung us, that we wouldn't have so many propositions on the ballot.
Right. So how will Proposition J, how can we make sure that the black community does benefit from it?
They just like I said earlier, like Michael said, they need to be, it's a contact sport. You need to be at the MTA every board meeting expressing your concerns. You need to be addressing all the MTA board meetings, whether they're board meeting or not. If you individually or other meetings, this is what we want. Expo Line, we built a Farmdale station. Partly Damian Goodman was involved with that. So there is a precedent locally building a station that wasn't in the initial plans.
Okay. All right. Very good. Do we have a caller, Richard? Hi, caller. You're on with the dialogue. You have a comment or question for our guest?
Yes, this is Vaughn King. I was trying to have a question for Michael Banner.
Okay.
All right. I was trying to find out from a small business perspective, how much more difficult will it be for the small business person to acquire loans in the new upcoming 4 years of the Obama administration?
Excellent question.
Well, first of all, good to hear from you, Vaughn, my college roommate.
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Sometimes you have to manufacture your own press. Can't leave it to chance.
Well, thank you for being obedient, Vaughn. Having your homeboys back. Very good.
I think part of the reality, and I talk to banks all day long, every day. I mean, that's part of what I do. Banks are my customer, and it's hard to get money from them.
Okay.
It's still very difficult. I probably worked with 15, 20 banks over the last 20 years. Nobody's ever gotten late payment. Nobody's had a loan default. I still can't get any money out of them now. And I'm thinking that the economy is getting slightly better now, and the reasons why they say no will start to diminish. And I do believe that competition is going to start to kick in right now.
Okay.
And it'll be helpful to small businesses because they have to. You can't run a bank without making loans. That's primarily what you're supposed to do. So it's gonna get buried. The President Obama, I think, has actually done a pretty good job during this last term of trying to create as many avenues to get capital into the hands of small businesses.
Okay.
Some of it's been indirectly by as example of having money go to the state, and then the state is supposed to try to get it to small businesses. Sometimes going directly to the state is not that smart. So, but I do think it's going to be a better day for small businesses going forward.
Okay. What about you, Stan?
I'm going to play a little bit the devil's advocate, Michael's comments. Until year 2000, the mean average of home ownership in the United States was around 61%.
Okay.
During the run-up of credit, during the beginning of the debt crisis, it went up to about 68%. The water's flowing back, and it's going to go back to the mean average we've had for the last 70 years of about a 61% home ownership rate, which means lending is going to be tough or tougher than it has been for the last 8 to 10 years, and for good reason.
And what about on the commercial real estate side? And thank you, Vaughn, for your call. What about on the commercial real estate side?
Same thing. Not to the same degree on the residential side, but lending got too lax on the commercial side, and that's why you saw a lot of commercial projects go into receivership.
So who's going to be buying homes in the future?
Well, housing prices right now are going up in most of the country. The housing market is roaring back because there is a strong amount of demand, and there hasn't been any new construction in a long time. I mean, now you're seeing bricks and mortar and a lot of framing going up. So, but your question is, who is the new buyer?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, people that are making money, and that gets to the question, the comment that Dr. Hart and Michael Banner made earlier, and that is the importance of just income and a growing economy.
Now, I know when we did our 172 condos in Baldwin Hills, half of those were sold to first-time home buyers who were able to benefit from Barack's first-time home buyer program.
Yeah.
So is that something that we could hopefully look for from him in the next 4 years, some type of assistance in purchasing our homes? Do you think?
Well, we need I think both banks and corporations are hoarding money, and they need to figure out how to get some of the money out into the marketplace under lending guidelines that are reasonable for both the borrower and the lender. And the extent to which Obama and his administration can impact the behavior of our banks and our corporations in terms of getting some of that money out in the marketplace is going to be important.
Okay, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me just add one thing, because there's something that I've seen that's in advertising that's happening now, about 30 days. So homeowner equity loans, HELOCs, were a big part of how small businesses finance themselves. And then when capital got tight and the residential mortgage market went away, HELOCs died. HELOCs are actually coming back now. U.S. Bank is advertising for HELOCs. If you start to see that, to me, that's a perception that the lenders believe that equity is going to continue to rise, and U.S. Bank is the kind of bank that would like to get there first.
Okay.
And there's a herd mentality in financial institutions where they follow each other. So I wouldn't be surprised that you'll start to see other lenders looking, because they have to make loans. They're not making loans now. The easiest way to run up your outstanding is to make real estate related loans. That's how you can grow your book the fastest.
Okay.
Yeah, and bank charters don't allow them to sit on money indefinitely.
Okay.
There's a window, there's a time horizon. They have to put it out.
Okay, excellent. And in the last few minutes, I want to talk about moving forward after yesterday's win, and we still have a mayoral race here in Los Angeles next week, as well as a few council district elections. Let's start with the mayoral race. What are your thoughts on the top three contenders, Jan Perry, Wendy Gruhl, and Eric Garcetti?
You know, all credible people.
Okay.
One of the questions, and I know them all very well and have known them for years, but I would ask that if you have been sitting around that horseshoe in the last 8 years and the city has a magnitude of problems, what were you thinking those 8 years while these problems were just kind of percolating, and what gives you the insight, or do you have some special skill now that is going to allow you to solve these problems?
Who do you think is the best person for the job?
Hard to tell right now.
Okay.
Because nobody's actually, I think, come up with very detailed plans about how they're going to solve some of these problems. And I don't think that was going to kick in until after we get past this election. So now the focus will be on actually it's 4 candidates, but the top 3 candidates trying to convince people now that I can do this better than somebody else. And what are you going to do?
Okay, Phil.
No, I agree with Michael. The other fourth candidate is Kevin James, who keeps saying the same thing. You've been sitting around that horseshoe for all these years. What have you done? And then the fact that Rick Caruso decided not to run is an important element as well. But I think the 3 candidates that are the top candidates, can all 3 be mayors? But I agree with Michael. What is your plan for addressing the city's issues?
You think LA is ready for a female mayor?
Yeah, I think LA is ready for a female mayor.
Okay, all right. Stan?
I think LA has been ready for a female mayor for 30 years.
So does that mean that you're going for Wendy Gruhl?
You know, my lips are sealed.
Okay. Council District 9. Kern Price just entered the race, and it has a whole lot of black folks in that race.
That's the full employment district.
right.
What's going to happen in Council District 9 now that Kern's entered the race?
Well,
you got Dave Roberts, you got Kern, you got
the point I made earlier in terms of, we have a circular process here in terms of our elected officials. They move from here to there to there. They're always in some elected office.
Right.
Maybe that's a good thing. I'm not convinced.
Okay. Stan, you have any thoughts on the...
No opinion.
I would say it goes back to the same thing. Do you have a plan?
Right.
And do you have the capacity to implement the plan you think is going to work?
All right.
Because they can't convince you of that. Why should you vote for them?
All right. In the last few seconds, I want to definitely educate our viewers on a couple of organizations. If you are interested in getting involved in real estate, to increasing your IQ in the real estate or the commercial real estate, we are all part of a few organizations. I'm going to ask Stan to talk about REAP. I'm going to ask Michael to talk about the Urban Land Institute, and Michael Banner to talk about Urban Marketplace coming up next year. But quickly, our real estate associate program here in Los Angeles.
Well, the real estate associate program we have in LA right now, it's typically a fall class. It's held Tuesday and Thursday nights in Santa Monica from 6 o'clock till 9. We have speakers on development, financing, real estate and mortgage brokering, entitlement, architecture, anything you can think of. The whole point is we know that the commercial real estate world in general is very short on representation by the minority community. And this program takes college grads, typically in business, 5 to 10 years, and gives them the opportunity of really learning the trade. So if they want to develop in South Central, they'll have the skills to do it.
Excellent. I think that's projectreap.org. Urban Land Institute. I'm going to Michael asked you to talk about Ross program. Urban Land Institute.
Michael and I are both longtime members of Urban Land Institute. We're both working hard to bring more diversity to that organization.
Okay. And ULI, do you know the website?
www.uli.org or www.uli-la.org, which is the LA District Council.
And the USC Ross Minority Program.
Excellent program. I happen to be alum of the inaugural class.
The inaugural class.
Yes. Much like Stan just said, it's another program for folks who really want to get grounded in the real estate industry. And the fact that it's affiliated with a major university also helps. It's the cheapest way to get some paper from USC.
Okay.
I highly recommend that.
The USC Ross program. I apologize for not having the website on me right now, but it is the USC Ross program. You can Google it. Thank you so much, Michael Banner, Los Angeles LDC, Phil Hart Realty Advisors, Stan Mullen Capital, and Management, Mullen Asset and Capital Management.
Sounds good.
Something like that. I love you anyway. I am Starlett Quarles. Thank you so much for joining us on the dialogue this week. I am signing off as my mama's child and my daddy's baby girl. Until next week.
We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.